All right. Welcome, everyone. It's a special call tonight. We have Dr. Brian Dixon, who is with LifeVantage. I'm going to read a little bit about his bio because it's very impressive. But thank you so much, Brian, for being part of our call, taking time out of your busy evening to share with us. But Dr. Brian Dixon is a Senior Vice President of Research and Development at LifeVantage. He's received his PhD in molecular and cellular biology from Oregon State University. And that's the Beavers, right? Not the Ducks.
Yeah, it's the other school that everyone forgets about. And we have to be careful. I see Dr. Gillespie is on the call,
I
so
know.
she's also a fellow Beaver.
Oh,
So
she's a Beaver
you'll
too.
make two people mad if you don't get that right.
I know. I had to look that up because I thought actually my daughter-in-law's mother is an Oregon Duck. So it's like, yeah, I know how passionate they are about, well, we all are about our schools, right? That we support. Okay, so he received his PhD in molecular cellular biology from Oregon State University, and he is affiliated with the Linus Pauling Institute. His work has been featured on, among others, the Dr. Oz Show, and he's authored a number of scientific peer-reviewed manuscripts on topics such as cancer, antioxidants, cellular signaling, gene regulation, stress coping mechanisms, NRF2, weight management, sports nutrition, and recovery. And Dr. Dixon has also published research on how we can facilitate a healthy inflammation response, ways to support the immune system, which we're going to dig in deeper dive tonight, and the aging process and how various nutrients come into play with all of those. And he has worked in the nutritional industry for over 10 years. And we're so lucky to have him as part of our company. He has 7 patents related to different supplements and things within the industry. He is an expert in the science of aging. And he grew up in the Pacific Northwest. He was sharing with me some of the pictures from where he grew up along the Columbia River in River Gorge area in Oregon, just absolutely breathtaking. And so he loves to be outdoors and lives in Utah with his beautiful family, his beautiful wife, Andrea, and 2 children, enjoys fishing, hiking, camping, and other outdoor activities. So thank you so much for joining our call tonight. We just want to talk a little bit about this upcoming product that's launching March 13th. Some of us have tried it and got our daily wellness in the mail already. And can't believe it. We were in Marco Island just a month ago in Florida with you, Dr. Brian, and, talking on the beach and tasting the wellness drink and having such a great time at that retreat that LifeVantage gave us. But, you and I and a few others of us that were talking on the beach that day, you really got into some really interesting aspects. I know on a different call that you did a few weeks ago, you talked about the prebiotic, the probiotics, and the postbiotics, and you categorize the 5 to thrive ingredients as this new daily wellness drink that LifeVantage is launching March 13th, that it basically is a postbiotic. So I'm going to toss it over to you and have you explain to us just why this drink is so unique, why it's so important, and just kind of help open up the mystery behind the gut health and immune response. So I'm going to turn it over to you, and thanks so much for being on our call tonight.
Well, it's absolutely my pleasure. And thank you so much for having me. And yeah, we did have a wonderful time there on the beach, hanging out that warm, sunny afternoon. It was really hard to leave, wasn't it?
Right.
But golly, if there's no other reason to go elite, it's for those trips, isn't it? They take really good care of us on there. So yeah, we got talking, and I promised her I'd jump on a call. And yeah, what I want to talk about today is daily wellness. I do have a presentation put together. I will kind of warn you in advance. I'm a scientist, so if I don't share science, I feel like it puts my job in jeopardy. So it is pretty scientific. I'll warn you, but I want you to maybe be at ease. Like, you don't have to have a PhD to sell this product or be a doctor or a medical professional. The marketing team, the brand team, they've really developed some just wonderful consumer-facing materials, shareables, PowerPoints, videos that are going to help you. But the reason I want to share this presentation is really just to maybe arm you all with some confidence. And I think it'll also give you a glimpse about what goes on in research and development, product development at LifeVantage. So you'll kind of see where our head's at and how we approach certain health benefits that we want to tackle. So yeah, with that, let me just jump into the presentation. Need to have my 11-year-old boy help me with computers sometimes. I swear.
I understand.
So yeah, let's talk about LifeVantage Daily Wellness, probably the worst kept secret at LifeVantage right now. So like you heard, it is going to be officially launching March 13th. So I wouldn't wait. It's sold out. The first round sold out in 2 hours, if you can believe that. I wouldn't wait. But what is LifeVantage Daily Wellness, just in case you haven't heard about it? So we like to think about LifeVantage Daily Wellness as being a powdered drink mix. So the format is really similar to our Axio nootropic beverages. So it's going to be a powder. It comes in that tub. There's a scoop there. It's just one scoop in as much water as you'd like. And you can make it as flavorful or as dilute as you like. So you can just add more or less water to get the flavor that you like. And I think really importantly, and where this is really going to differentiate in a relatively crowded market space, is it's meant to be support daily. And that's where I think the brand team did an amazing job coming up with the name for this, with daily wellness. So this isn't meant to be one of those products where you feel that little tickle in your throat and then you race down to your corner drugstore or the supermarket and buy one of those off the shelf products. This is meant to be proactive protection, not reactive, if that makes sense. And I'll tell you an interesting story. I just went out to dinner. One of my neighbors works at one of our competitors, maybe indirectly, that his company is the company that develops Airborne. And he was telling me that sales of Airborne are drastically down this year for them. And the major reason is most of us have been really careful this year. Some of us are still in lockdowns. And so the flu isn't having the run that it's normally had this year. So as a result, these reactive products are really suffering. And so I think this also positions us really, really uniquely, because this is meant to be consumed daily. Okay. And it's meant to support our overall health, but it's specifically designed to support our immune system. So I think I'm going to spend maybe the first 3/4 of this presentation just talking about the science of our immune system. And like I said, how we were thinking about product development when we were developing this product. And, I'd be remiss if I didn't thank the entire R&D team, the brand team as well, intimately involved with this. And I think this is a product that we're all very, very proud of. So if you've ever seen me present, I love definitions. So before I get to that, let's talk about our immune system. So what is it? How does it work? And what can we do to support it? So there's that definition that I promised. So technically, our immune system is this coordinated system of cells, proteins, and chemical signals that are designed to keep us as healthy as possible. And I think that's what we normally think about our immune system. But our immune system plays so many different roles inside of our bodies, above and beyond just immunity. One example I like to talk about is the wound healing process. So a natural process that we're all capable of doing, especially when we're healthy, right? So if I get a little cut on my finger, it turns out the immune system is integral and essential for that little cut on my finger to heal. So what happens, and it's a process of about 4 to 5 different, very defined and discrete steps. So the first thing that happens is immune cells come to that side of the cut, and their first job is to start cleaning up the dead and damaged cells. So, right, the immune cell is helping with this cellular and tissue turnover and regeneration. And then as the immune system is going through these 5 steps of the wound healing process, it eventually signals to the surrounding skin cells that, okay, now it's time to grow and divide, and let's close up that small cut. So like I said, it's essential for so many different functions, and it's really just fascinating to read about. If you're a nerd like me a little bit, I'd encourage you to read more about everything that the immune system does. But where I want to focus the majority of the talk tonight is how we normally think of our immune system. So, what makes up our immune system? And there are three systems that make up our immune system. And forgive me, there's a little bit of scientific jargon here. I couldn't think of a better way to say it, but they are known as your innate immune system. And I like to think of this as being really kind of an archaic part of our immune system, or ancient part of our immune system. And then we have this adaptive part of our immune system. It's also known as acquired immunity as well. So this part of our immune system is very, very advanced, and it even has memory. Now, I don't know if everyone on this call is old enough to remember chickenpox parties, but when I was a kid, my mom stuffed me in a room with other kids with chickenpox. So my brother and I would get it when we were, probably at the best age to ward off chickenpox. But we tend to only get chickenpox once in our life. And that's because the adaptive part of our immune system has this memory function built into it naturally. It's amazing. But then there's a third, and I think really highly overlooked part of our immune system. And I don't know, does anybody know what that might be? And I should also offer, if you guys have questions during this, please, we can type them into the chat, and I'd be happy to answer a few questions after this as well. But that third part of our immune system is what's known as the barrier system, the barrier part of our immune system. So this is our skin, right? The skin's job is to keep the outside world out and the inside world in. So I like to think of it as almost like a castle. So the higher the walls of the castle, the thicker the walls, right? The more defensible that position is. So our skin, it can be argued, is the most important part of our immune system, because the less things it can let in, the less our immune system actually has to work. And something known as immune system fatigue is a real thing, and why some of these reactive approaches to immunity aren't always the best. They're meant to be taken short term, because you can overstimulate your immune system, and that can ultimately have some negative consequences. The other part of this barrier system is something we don't think about very often, and that's our gut. And so if you think about it, we're basically a tube from our mouth to the other end, and that's exposed to the outside environment as well. So the air we breathe, the food that we eat, and all the stuff that comes along with it. So we have effectively this layer of skin that also lines our digestive system. And so we also have to be thinking about our gut health when we're talking about immune health. So let's talk about these three systems, and we'll start with the barrier function. And I talked about that castle analogy. So we want nice, tightly packed skin cells to make as strong of a barrier as we can. We don't want to open the door to the castle, if you will. And then what else is neat about this part of our immune system is now there's this crosstalk that goes on. So we'll have certain immune cells that live kind of right below that last layer of our skin. So if that door does get opened or the wall gets breached, our immune system can do what it does. Now, the two other parts of our immune system, the innate and adaptive immune system, are incredibly complex. And this was one of the more simple schematics that I could find. And I'm not going to go through this, but I want to make a couple points here. Is there are a number of different cells that make up our immune system. But what else is incredibly fascinating to me is that all of these different cells, no matter what you're going to become when you mature, all originate from a single stem cell. So very early on, when that stem cell starts to divide and the daughter cell, as they call it, emerges, that daughter cell has to make the decision, what type of immune cell do I want to become? And so this process scientifically is known as differentiation. And it's incredibly important that those cells are making the right decisions, because we want all of these different populations of immune cells to be in a nice, healthy balance, because they're all doing pretty unique things in our immune system. Now, we like to think about these two parts of our immune system as being really very discrete. But the reality is they can communicate with each other. So they can communicate through those chemical signals we were talking about during that definition. But there's also cells that can kind of go back and forth between that innate immunity and the adaptive immunity. So they're in close communication and they're coordinating with each other to do what our immune system needs to do. So if you remember, I mentioned that innate part of our immune system is pretty archaic and it works pretty indiscriminately. And I've got, a pretty grandiose analogy on the screen, and that being a nuclear bomb going off. So, when a bomb goes off, it's really indiscriminately hurting everything around it, right? There's going to be some effect for some distance around where that bomb goes off. And the cells of our innate immune system are working in this very similar way. They're very indiscreet in how they go about their job. Now, you might think, well, that's, a bad thing and we don't want that. And that's not exactly the case, because the innate part of our immune system also tends to be the first responders. So the first on the scene to do what the immune system needs to do. But compare and contrast that with the adaptive part of our immune system. It is unbelievably precise, right? It has this precision, it's incredibly advanced. And so I like to think of the cells of our adaptive immune system as being more of the snipers, if you will, of our immune system. So coming back to that definition of our immune system, I underlined here chemical signals because there's some really interesting chemical signaling that goes on. At LifeVantage, we love to talk about nutrigenomics and cell signaling and activating genes. Well, we can utilize a number of different nutrients to do the exact same thing inside of our immune system. And this all is working nutrigenomically through various types of signals. And this is something that we see throughout nature, right? We know that ants can follow these pheromone trails to find food or water or find their way back to the nest. Um, Maybe not as common of an analogy, but when a moth or butterfly wants to mate, the female will go high on a branch and she'll start fluttering her wings and also put out a pheromone trail. Now, the male moth or butterfly is very uniquely equipped to be able to smell those pheromones, and he will basically weave his way up that pheromone cloud and kind of following the density of that cloud until he finally finds that female butterfly and they make little baby butterflies. So something very similar is happening inside of our bodies. So here is kind of a reenactment of what our immune system might be going through. So here what these scientists did was put a whole bunch of immune cells on a microscope slide, and then they dropped a little microscopic worm on that microscope slide. So it's a short little video, but when you're watching this video, draw attention to kind of the middle of the worm and then down on the bottom. What you're going to see are a few immune cells initially figure out that worm probably shouldn't be there. It's going to release signals and it's going to recruit a number of those surrounding immune cells. And I like to show these types of videos, and it's what I call making the invisible visible. So I don't think until we actually see what's going on do we actually appreciate everything that our immune system is doing. You see all the activity, and then they all start to swarm in. Isn't that pretty fascinating? I've got one more little video here, and let me set this up just to orientate everybody. So here, same thing. Scientists took a drop of blood and put it on a microscope slide. The kind of the largest cell, kind of, I don't know, ghost shape or a bell maybe laying on its side. That's one of our immune cells. The more round and darker cells on there are going to be our red blood cells. And then what they did was drop a cluster of bacteria on this microscope slide. And what you're going to see is that little bacteria kind of vibrating around this microscope slide. But watch how this immune cell will actively hunt this bacteria. It's fascinating. So it's literally following it around the microscope slide. And it's doing this because that immune cell can literally smell these chemical trails that are being given off by that bacteria. But then watch, like the immune cell can even completely change directions, and then it eventually engulfs it, and it does what an immune cell does. So how cool is that? I think it's pretty fascinating. All right, back to a little bit of basic high school chemistry. I'm kidding. I'm not going to go through this, I promise. But remember, I showed that analogy of our innate immune system. Well, our immune cells, and especially the cells of our innate immune system, have some really interesting biochemistry that goes on. So I showed that analogy of the nuclear bomb going off, and it's actually not that crazy of an analogy, because some of these biochemical pathways are actually producing similar compounds that are produced during a nuclear reaction or a nuclear explosion. And that's really how they're working. And if I can specifically draw your attention to the lower left-hand side of the slide, I highlighted a few compounds that you'll probably recognize. So down there at the very bottom, there's a compound called HOSCN. And I call that compound out because anywhere you see CN in a molecular structure is cyanide. And I think we all know how toxic cyanide can be. Right above cyanide, we have a compound called H2O2. Anybody know what that compound might be? You might know it as hydrogen peroxide. And then if we go straight left of hydrogen peroxide, there's another compound called HOCl. Anyone know what that one might be? Scientifically, it's called hypochlorous acid, but we know it as common everyday bleach. So if we do get that little cut on our finger, what do we use to clean it out? Hydrogen peroxide. What do we use to clean our countertops? Bleach, right? So these cells, these immune cells, especially in our innate part of our immune system, make some really interesting molecules, and this is how they can do their job. It's not just the compounds I mentioned, but also a whole bunch of free radicals and other oxidants. And I think at LifeVantage, we also know the consequences that those molecules can have. The last thing I want to draw your attention to on this slide is that compound right below that H2O2. You see it says SOD. That's superoxide dismutase. And again, I think at LifeVantage, we're all very familiar with talking about upregulating that enzyme SOD. It has just tremendous antioxidant potential. So here we see that the immune cell is making free radicals and other oxidants, but it also needs to protect itself at the same time. Because remember, I said these compounds and how the innate part of our immune system is working is very indiscriminate. Those compounds are going to be working on the immune cells themselves. They're going to be working on our own cells or tissues, and they can also have the same negative consequences. And maybe the best analogy I can draw to maybe make this hit home a little bit, but if I were to ask you the question, are you more sore the first day after you exercise or the second day? It's usually the second day, right? But have you ever thought why is that? Well, the reason you are more sore the second day after exercise is because of an immune response. Okay, so let's talk about what's happening after exercise. So when you're actually exercising, you're making little microscopic tears in those muscle fibers, which really means you're going to be rupturing some of those muscle cells. Well, our immune system can also smell, if you will, the insides of cells. So when something starts leaking, our immune system thinks that something bad is happening. So what does it do? It sends a bunch of immune cells to that side of damage because it thinks there's a problem. So, right, who are the first responders? It's that innate part of our immune system. They start enacting this biochemistry of free radicals and other oxidants, and it goes on to further damage the muscle cell. So that takes about 24 hours to happen, and that's why you're more sore the second day after exercise than the first day. What else has been shown is that after exercise, you can supplement with some form of antioxidants, whether they're indirect or direct antioxidants, and you can blunt that response that's known as delayed onset muscle soreness or DOMS. Okay, so this is going to become important in just a minute. So in reality, our immune system can be turned off and on. I think we all kind of intuitively know that, but it's not quite that simple. So when we're talking about our immune system, what we want to be talking about is a healthy, balanced approach to our immune system, because the reality is our immune system is always just a little bit on and a little bit off. And then sometimes that teeter, will go one way or another depending on the situation that we're at. So again, that's why it's so important to have all of those populations of immune cells and keep a nice, balanced, healthy response and be proactive instead of reactive, so we don't tip things too far one way or the other. So when we're talking about maintaining this healthy, balanced response, what we really want to be thinking about are those three parts of our immune system: the barrier system, right, or our skin and gut, our innate immune system, and our adaptive immunity. But to take that even one step further, what we really want to be talking about is supporting our gut and skin health. We want to be talking about antioxidant protection for the reasons I just talked about, looking at all that biochemistry. So we want to protect the immune cells, but also our own cells. And then also we want to talk about that immune cell growth, the differentiation or that decision-making process that has to go on when those young immune cells are growing and maturing, their activation, and also their efficiency. So in thinking about these three aspects, this is how we started going about developing LifeVantage Daily Wellness. And so to do that, we ended up landing on a formula that has 5 different ingredients. And you heard it when Marilyn was giving her introduction, 5 to thrive. So a really easy way to remember the 5 ingredients in LifeVantage Daily Wellness, 5 to thrive. So let's talk about these five ingredients. I like to break them down into 2 different categories. So the first is essential vitamins and minerals. And that word essential is incredibly important because in biology, that word essential has a very specific meaning. And that meaning is it's essential for life. The reason they're essential is because our bodies don't make them, and or they're really poor at recycling these various nutrients. So we have to get them from our diet or our nutritional supplement. And so 3 vitamins and minerals that have been shown to have great effects on our immune system are vitamin C, vitamin D, and zinc. So we have vitamin C in there at 150 milligrams. And there's 2 reasons why vitamin C was added. The first is for antioxidant protection. Okay, I think most of us think of vitamin C as being an antioxidant, and it definitely is, especially when it's in excess. Something interesting about some of these cells of our immune system is they specifically want to concentrate vitamin C inside of themselves. So vitamin C has to be transported actively into a cell. So there's these little carrier proteins that help vitamin C get inside of a cell. It turns out some of these immune cells have just a tremendous amount of these transporters on their outside cell membrane. And it's been shown that these immune cells specifically want to concentrate vitamin C, and they end up concentrating vitamin C somewhere between 100 to 1,000 times the concentration inside of themselves as we would have just circulating around in our blood. So very clearly, these immune cells want vitamin C around. But then when we start talking more about the essential functions of vitamin C, it gets very interesting. Vitamin C is involved in about 8 different biochemical reactions. It's involved in energy production, among a number of different things. But it's also been shown to activate cell division. So we want vitamin C around to help get those immune cells growing and dividing. It also helps with that decision-making process. So what immune cell do I want to become when I grow up? Well, vitamin C helps with that decision-making process. And then another essential function for vitamin C is in making collagen. And if you're not familiar with what collagen is really the glue that holds many of our cells together, including those of our skin especially. So it's the little glue that's going to keep everything tightly packed together. So vitamin C is going to help with that antioxidant production, cell division, differentiation, and it's going to help with that barrier function. Then we start talking about vitamin D. It's in there at 5 micrograms. And vitamin D is a really interesting vitamin because it's not a vitamin like we think of a vitamin in a traditional sense. So normally when we're talking about what vitamins are doing inside of the cell, they're helping the cell do all of that biochemistry that it needs to do. So they're kind of consumed and used up and then excreted from our body. But vitamin D isn't doing that. It's acting more like a hormone. And in fact, it's been hypothesized that vitamin D is the oldest hormone on the face of this planet. Inside of our cells, it's been shown to regulate over 2,000 different genes, which becomes a pretty significant percentage of the genes that we have inside of our body. And many of those genes are directly involved in the immune system and immune support. So by providing vitamin D, we're also going to help support the cells of our innate and adaptive immunity. Then we have zinc. Again, just tremendous effects of zinc. Zinc has been shown to be part of no fewer than 300 different enzymes and associates with over 1,000 different proteins. So you can see just on number alone, zinc is providing so many different functions to our body, including the cells of our immune system. Zinc can be both a direct antioxidant, so working kind of like vitamin C is in this one-for-one exchange, but it's also working intimately as an indirect antioxidant. So we were talking about SOD earlier, and SOD is a really interesting family of proteins. There's 3 general families of superoxide dismutases inside of our body. The thing they all have in common is they require zinc to work. So if SOD does not have zinc placed inside of itself, so it can do its antioxidant function, it's been shown that SOD will actually work in reverse and generate free radicals and other oxidants. So making sure we have enough zinc around to make sure we have enough zinc to put into SOD is absolutely essential. But then we start talking about some of those other functions that zinc has through its association with all those enzymes and all those other proteins, helping with cell division, cell differentiation. It's going to help support all 3 aspects of our immune system, the innate, adaptive, and that barrier function. The second class of nutrients that we have in daily wellness, I like to just call them nutritional extracts. So I think many of us have heard about elderberry and just how great it can be to help support our immune system. In fact, it's been used for centuries for just about everything under the sun, including supporting our immune system. Elderberry is so interesting because it's providing vitamins, minerals, more antioxidants, and phytonutrients. Phytonutrients that can be antioxidants themselves, but can also work nutrigenomically to help activate certain things we want inside of the immune cells. And one of these compounds, or I should say class of compounds, is very interesting. And those are called anthocyanins. And it's a very interesting read. So again, if you're a nerd like me, I might encourage you to read just a little bit more about anthocyanins, but they are intimately involved with our immune system and help keeping that healthy response in check. Elderberry we have in at 200 milligrams. So just a great daily dose of elderberry. And then the last ingredient is really the hero ingredient, in my opinion, of LifeVantage Daily Wellness. And the more I read about it, the more I'm just in love with it. This whole yeast ferment is a very interesting compound, and it has its roots actually in the cattle industry. They initially started feeding something similar to cattle, and they found that really by helping with the animals' stress levels overall, that these cattle were able to grow bigger, produce more milk, and were just better cattle. And as the story goes on, as they started scaling up and became a full-blown company, what they found is that the workers who were working actually inside of this manufacturing plant were far healthier than their colleagues that were working in the office building next door. So a bright scientist they had on staff started exploring exactly what was going on, and he found that this fermented yeast extract was having all sorts of benefits to help support a healthy immune system. Um, this is where, like Marilyn said, technically it's considered a postbiotic because what they're doing is putting yeast on a proprietary blend of food. And when you give the yeast this certain type of food, and as they're kind of chewing it up and eating it, they're producing a whole bunch of different metabolites that have just tremendous effects on our immune system. So some of these metabolites from this postbiotic slurry, if you will, include proteins, polyphenols, which are generally considered antioxidants, more vitamins, more minerals, amino acids, scientific word, polysaccharides, which really just means complex carbohydrates. There's also a bunch of fiber, and then these things called beta glucans. And beta glucans are almost the bones of yeast and fungi, if you will. It's what's giving the support to the yeast. But these beta glucans have just tremendous immune benefits. How they're working is these beta glucans get into our systems and they get metabolized by one population of immune cells. Those metabolites get released back out into our bodies and then can actually bind to specific receptors on immune cells that works in a mechanism that's called priming. And the analogy I like for priming is it's almost like there's two locks on the outside of these immune cells. And I should also say that usually, remember, we're talking about this balanced response. So normally our immune system is kind of just laying there pretty quietly, but it's almost like they have to be bumped or shook to be awoke. And so this priming mechanism is doing just that. So it's like removing or unlocking one of these locks on the immune cell so that it can more quickly unlock its full potential. So just a really interesting scientific mechanism of how this ingredient's working. And then we also know that it has tremendous effects on our overall gut health. And if you've never heard the statistic, somewhere between 70 to 80% of our immune system is residing inside of our gut. So we have this now direct interaction with a healthy microbiome and our immune system. So the postbiotics that are in this fermented yeast extract are actually working to support a healthy microbiome, and it's going to support obviously barrier function, but also through that priming mechanism, the cells of our innate and adaptive immunity. So a really cool ingredient. And this ingredient is backed by just a tremendous amount of research. There are 15 different studies on this ingredient, 7 preclinical studies, and 8 human clinical studies. And I should also say that those studies looked at exactly 500 milligrams. So we have the full clinical dose of this ingredient in LifeVantage Daily Wellness. So just a wonderful product, something I'm just incredibly proud of. I think we're going to make a huge difference in the LifeVantage family, keeping people as absolutely healthy as possible. So really easy to remember: 5 to thrive, vitamin C, vitamin D, zinc, elderberry, and this fermented yeast extract. So I hope that gives you a little bit of insight and kind of what's going on with our immune system, kind of what goes on behind the scenes a little bit in product development. And hopefully you all have just a little bit more appreciation for our immune systems. The one thing, I can't say it loud enough, but the regulators have not gone away, and the immune space is something that they are watching incredibly closely. So I can't urge you all enough. Please stay compliant. We have a number of just tremendous legal claims that we can make about LifeVantage Daily Wellness. Please, 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 nothing about COVID, viruses, bacteria. Let's just stick to these great claims that we've come up with. So again, we have 5 tremendous claims, and I think you'll see that we don't need to go there. These claims are going to speak for themselves. And if you all haven't seen it, the brand team and the marketing team have just a number of resources that are available to you already in your back office. So if you want to learn more, if you haven't already, go in there, download them, start reading, and start maybe planning what you're going to do when March 13th comes around. I tell you all of that because in addition, our legal and compliance team have also put a document up there about what you can and can't say about LifeVantage Daily Wellness. So another wonderful tool that we can utilize to make sure that we're saying the right things and especially not saying the wrong things. But let's go through these 5 claims, and I think you'll see why why we don't have to even go there. Okay. So the first claim we can make is boost our body's responses to stress. And when I say stress, I mean stresses of all types. It can be physical stress, it can be mental stress, right? So I'm using the word very, very generically. So it makes our body more resilient to stress. Okay. So making us healthy every second of every day. It's going to support everyday health and well-being. Another just great claim, LifeVantage Daily Wellness. It's going to support that balanced gut microbiome for the reasons I was talking about earlier. But then look at these last two claims. So things we can say legally about LifeVantage Daily Wellness. It's going to support respiratory and sinus health, and it's going to improve your immune response, right? Doesn't that say it all right there? So wonderful claim set that we're able to put together for you all. So go out and sing these from the rooftops. And again, please stay away from any of those non-compliant claims. So Marilyn, that's all I really had on the scientific front. I'm, free most of the evening. So if whatever you'd like to do the rest of the time, I'm more than happy to stick around for just a little bit.
That's awesome. We have a couple of questions in the chat. So I know Dr. Kelly Heath, he is a veterinarian at the University of Nebraska. So Kelly, do you want to unmute and ask your question about the dose of vitamin D?
Sure, thanks. Say, I just want to echo what you were talking about, the yeast fermentation product being fed to cattle. That is a real deal, and I'm glad you brought that up. But my real question is, what was the thought process behind determining the dose of vitamin D that was placed in this product? It seems to me to be a bit on the low side, and so I just wondered what your reasoning was.
Yeah, there's a couple rationales there. And, if you've ever heard me talk about vitamin D, I absolutely love it. I think most of us should be taking somewhere around 5,000 international units per day. To put that in perspective, we have 200 in LifeVantage Daily Wellness. I don't know. I'm old school. I like the international units. This microgram switch has really made it hard on me. But the rationale where we landed at 200 international units is twofold. One, we wanted this to be as international of a formula as possible. So there was a particular market or two that limited us with that vitamin D concentration. Now, the reason I don't have any concerns about that dose, one, it's meant to be taken every single day. But the other thing that we needed to take into consideration is the amount of vitamin D we currently have in the product line, and then maybe a little bit of a spoiler alert. You're going to see some other products this year coming out that are also going to have vitamin D. So it really becomes exponentially complicated as we're developing products and more products. We have to take safety into consideration. So when we start taking into consideration what's already there, so between Omega Plus, for example, we have 800 international units plus the 200 here, that's 1,000. And then when you see some other products coming out later this year, we're going to get you that dose that you need. And so safety was also at the forefront of our mind, thinking about the entire product line in the future. But I would encourage everybody, vitamin D is the #1 nutritional deficiency in the world, if you can believe that. And I don't care if you live in Florida or Arizona, odds are you still are going to be vitamin D deficient. So the next time you're at your doctor's office, please have him or her test your vitamin D levels. I recommend that people's levels should be above 40. So I shoot for 50. And if you're interested in the units, that's nanograms per mil in the United States. And then we also know that if you're below 100 is completely safe. So shoot for above 40 and less than 100. And I think if you do go get your vitamin D tested, you'll probably be surprised what your level actually is. So I hope that answers your question, Kelly.
Yep, thank you. I wondered if it wasn't related to safety or some regulatory thing. So that makes perfect sense. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, another question that came through was daily wellness. Okay, so like our prebiotic, we were told that there's like a 30-minute window when you mix up your prebiotic that you should drink it within the 30 minutes. Is this similar when you mix the daily wellness, or can you sip it all day long, or is there a window where it's more effective because it has that yeast product in it?
That's a really good question. The reason we want you to drink the prebiotic as relatively quickly as possible, one of the main mechanisms and where you're getting a lot of the health benefit from the fiber, especially that's in the prebiotic, is because it will pull water in and it starts to gel. So we want that gelling to occur inside of our bodies and not inside of the container. So that's why we encourage that pretty rapid consumption of prebiotic. Here, we're not utilizing a similar mechanism. So it's perfectly fine to mix it up. There's really no time crunch to chug it down. You can sip on it throughout the day or throughout the morning. There should be no problems with leaving around. I wouldn't leave it around forever because there are no preservatives in it. So it will maybe start to grow some things that shouldn't, but outside of that, there's no concerns with sipping on it slow throughout the day. Marilyn, I'm sorry. I think you're muted there.
Sorry about that. I have seen where, so it is a compliant claim to say this does help with immune sinus health, or how should we word that? Sinus.
Improve sinus and respiratory health.
Because there's some of us that have actually taken this product for about a month now and have really seen some great results regarding the sinus health. So there's a lot of people that really find that to be helpful. There was a question, Vanessa, I missed part of your question. Did you want to unmute and ask that, please?
Sure. It actually has to do with the epicor.
Okay.
So kind of two parts. So one of them, the people that are very vegan or crunchy or health, whatever, they take a lot of fermentation, like fermented foods like kombucha and kimchi and apple cider vinegar and all those things. And all of them are basically for better probiotic health.
Mm-hmm.
And so how would I explain the difference between the fermented yeast for a postbiotic versus a probiotic health?
Yeah, that's a good question. And yeah, all of those things have some great postbiotics in them as well. I mean, kombucha is fermented, everything's fermented, right? So you're putting something in there, normally yeast, they're chewing up something for food in there, and then you're utilizing those metabolites. So it's another way to get some postbiotic. I don't really think that there's a comparison when we start talking about the levels and the dosages that are going to be in, say, kombucha versus LifeVantage Daily Wellness. You just don't get a whole bunch of those metabolites that are there. And not to say that kombucha is not healthy or these other fermented foods are not healthy. I think we should be eating those things. We should be getting both the probiotics and the postbiotics that are going to be in those foods. I mean, you'll never hear me say don't eat a healthy diet. Where things start to fall apart a little bit is, one, I think people are really misinformed that eating, say, yogurt or kombucha is going to give you a clinically effective dose of different, especially probiotics. There's not going to be many living organisms left in there. And then it also still has to transit the entire digestive system. Most of our microbiome is living at the very end of our digestive system. And then the other thing that's very easy to maybe combat that argument, if you will, or objection, is we have the clinical research as well that supports the product. So while they're healthy foods, I don't know that they can say improves your immune system or supports your respiratory and sinus health. So we've got the clinical backing and the science to support those claims.
Perfect. Thank you. And then my second question just was, in case I missed it, can you just explain I guess the easiest way of the difference between the probiotics and the post?
Sure. So and I'll throw prebiotic in there as well. So I do, if you've seen me talk on the microbiome, I like to talk about prebiotic, probiotic, and postbiotic. So really I make people learn three vocabulary words. So prebiotic, the way I like to think about it, it's either the food or the fertilizer for the actual living organisms. That's the food that they're eating. And it's really a beautiful system if you think about it. Like I mentioned, most of our microbiome is living at the very bottom of our digestive system. And it's this true mutualism that goes on. I just read a study that was published that shows you can basically look at somebody's microbiome now and predict how old they're going to live. So who's living there is incredibly important. And so they're also making these healthy compounds for us. And that's where we get these health benefits. But if you think about how beautiful this system is and this true mutualism, because they're living at the very end of our digestive system, these healthy bacteria and other organisms are giving our bodies the first opportunity to digest our food, vitamins, minerals. And they're basically eating and consuming the waste products that we can't consume. And it turns out that when they're eating mostly these fibers and other compounds that we can't digest, fibers, complex, some complex carbohydrates, those metabolites that they release are healthy. That's where we get the health benefit. So prebiotic food, probiotic is the actual organism itself. So generally those are bacteria, especially in the nutrition field. And then we have postbiotics. And I don't know if this is a good analogy or a terrible analogy, so forgive me in advance, but we're talking about metabolism, we're talking about yeast, and we're talking about metabolites. So an analogy you can maybe think of is maybe making wine or making beer, but you're harvesting some form of sugar, whether it's from grain and it's beer or whether it's grapes and it's wine. Then you're adding these yeast into that, and they're chewing up the sugar, and the metabolite that they're excreting is the alcohol that comes along with the wine or the beer. So the alcohol is the metabolite, right? What it turns out you can do is you can steer that biochemistry just a little bit depending on the food that you're giving these different yeast. So based on this proprietary food blend that they're feeding the yeast, they have directed, if you will, that biochemistry and metabolism of these yeast to produce all of those healthy compounds that I listed off. So we're getting just tremendous postbiotic benefits, these metabolites, if you will. And let me say too, just quickly, the whole reason this postbiotic, I guess, category of the microbiome came up is because it turns out we have, I mean, literally trillions of these cells living on and inside of us. And so scientists, right, they're trying to isolate these different organisms from our bodies, and then they need to grow them up, and then they need to figure out if they can live for a long period of time on a shelf. Can they survive the transit through the harsh digestive system? And if you think about where these bacteria are living, it's an incredibly harsh environment, and it's really hard to mimic outside of the body. So a lot of these organisms that they can isolate initially, they either one, can't grow up, two, can't keep them around very long, or three, can't give them back to us to elicit the same health benefit. So the reason postbiotics came along, well, the thought was, well, we can grow these up, the ones we can grow up in the laboratory, we can just grow them up, let them eat what they normally eat, and then isolate those metabolites back and then give those metabolites as the supplement. So it was really a workaround to try to get the health benefits from these bacteria that they couldn't grow up initially. And now that's becoming more and more leveraged, and you're going to be seeing more of it as well this year. So I hope that answers your question. Sorry, long-winded.
No, it was great. Actually, thank you so much for that. Also, I kind of geek out on the science too, and I like to learn about the science in order for me to spit it out better. So thank you for that.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Thank you.
Excellent. Okay. And then one other question is are children able to drink this as well?
Well, just LifeVantage is a conservative company, for better or worse. I tend to think better, right? We're looking to protect everybody's business. I love my job, so I want to keep it. We err on the side and say 18 and older.
Right.
And that's what I'll have to say here.
But if you give your kids a Flintstone vitamin, that's, it's like, well.
Yeah, the best way to do it, and the way I'll talk about it is, work with your pediatrician, OBGYN, whoever it is you're seeing, print out the label and just say, hey, is this okay for my kid to drink? The levels of the nutrients shouldn't scare anybody away. I mean, the vitamin C, the D, and the zinc, I don't think that would give a pediatrician any concern. And the reason for that is there just haven't been the clinical studies done on children. One of the hats I've worn almost my whole career is doing human clinical studies. And to do a human clinical study, you first have to get approval through what's called an institutional review board, or an IRB. And their primary focus is to make sure that there's no potential to harm for the subjects that are in the study. And it's almost impossible to get that IRB approval to do work on children, women who are pregnant or breastfeeding, because there's just not the research out there. So it kind of creates this vicious cycle of not being able to do clinical research. So the reason we err on that side of caution is just because the studies aren't there.
Okay, good. No, I understand. And then what about like you say you wanted to take a morning dose of daily wellness and then maybe one in the evening. If you're feeling run down, want to kind of double up on a dose morning and evening, is that okay? I mean, obviously we're not going to be able to overdose on this.
Yeah, I wouldn't have any heartburn with 2 per day for sure. When we start getting into to say 4 a day, I'll start to get a little bit of concern. And short term, it's okay, but you wouldn't want to do 4 or more for a very long time. And the reason for that is the level of zinc that's in the product. So it's in there at 10 milligrams. Just to put it in context, the RDA for women is 8 milligrams per day, and it's 11 for men. But zinc does have a double-edged sword, and it's been shown that when you get above about 40 milligrams per day of zinc, there can be some negative consequences. So it will actually start to work in reverse. But where it can become really detrimental is it competes with copper for transport. So we need copper in orders of magnitude lower dosages than we do zinc. So you're basically swamping out all of these transporters for copper. And so one can ultimately become copper deficient, and that will have some serious consequences. So 2 a day, no, but I wouldn't go much more than 4 for a significant amount of time.
Plus, if we're on other supplements, we don't want to, because if they have zinc in them, obviously you don't want to overdose that way either. So
that's exactly right. And again, what we were doing, looking at the levels of zinc we have already in the product line, and then also what's coming. So yeah, we're always thinking about safety first.
I love that. What's coming? It's so exciting. Okay, well, we're going to wrap our call here. One more question. Anybody want to quick unmute? Otherwise, we're going to let Dr. Dixon or Brian go.
Brian, yeah, thanks.
Brian, thank you so much for.
We had one person that wanted to confirm that there was no dairy and that it was vegan and gluten-free, etc.
Okay, so it's gluten-free. It's actually free of all known allergens. So that would, or I should say the major allergens. So that would include dairy. It's technically not vegan, but it is vegetarian. The reason it's not vegan is because of the vitamin D. And this is a very common situation when you do have vitamin D. So if you want a natural form of vitamin D, almost all of it that's available out there is isolated from sheep's wool. So, if you're a strict vegan in that sense of the word, vitamin D is technically an animal product, and a lot of vegans don't consider vitamin D from sheep's wool to be vegan. So it is vegetarian, but not vegan for the strict crunchy people, as they were referred to earlier.
Wonderful. One other thing I just thought of too, and I know you addressed this at the Elite Retreat when you talked about the NRF2, and now we are going to have an NRF2 bundle with the daily wellness. Can you just kind of end on the importance of why we don't want people to just say, okay, then I'll just do the daily wellness, I don't need to take an NRF2 or a Tri-Synergizer, but by bundling them, what's the advantage of that?
Yeah, it's a great question. And introducing LifeVantage Daily Wellness is going to open up a whole bunch of doors for us, especially in this healthy immunity space. Especially when, COVID was going on. A lot of people wanted to start talking about our products as immune products. In the past, we had never talked about the Protandim line as really being pro-immunity, if you will, or helping with that healthy immune response. When everything was going on last year, just a wonderful scientist that I work with, Dr. Christina Beer, she went and did a very thorough claim substantiation, looking at immune claims that we could make with all 3 of the products of the immune system. So we have the substantiation for those 3 products, and others. But because we had never made immune claims before, we were worried what the regulators would think, like we were jumping on a pandemic. And that's, of course, not what we were doing, just trying to help support everybody. So by releasing LifeVantage Daily Wellness, we have these very strong immune claims that we can make, and then coupling it to the other substantiations that we have with our other products, we're going to be able to bundle these together and make even stronger immune claims. So there's a number of reasons why, let's say, Protandim NRF2 is wonderful for your immune system, but one of the major effects it's going to have is through its antioxidant support. And then, something we don't talk about as much is NRF2 also controls a number of detoxification genes as well. So it's what's known as the phase 2 and phase 3 part of our metabolism. So helping first neutralize and then ultimately transport things out of the body. So through those mechanisms, it has just wonderful immune supporting mechanisms. And so by bundling those together, I think it's a brilliant idea, and you'll be seeing more immune type bundles coming as well in the future.
That's wonderful to know. And because you did say something about vitamin C being like almost like a catalyst to help NRF2 work better.
Yeah, it's so interesting. A question I do get, I'm surprised I didn't get it tonight. In the past, we've always talked about make your antioxidants, don't take them. And so, people are just like, oh my gosh, well, now how am I going to talk about vitamin C? We've been steering away from that. The situation is it's not an either or thing. So what we really want to be talking about is overall antioxidant protection. An interesting side story is the whole reason NRF2 was initially discovered was because they found that antioxidants actually activate NRF2. So to bring that point home, right, NRF2 is normally anchored to the cell membrane. It gets released through some really interesting chemistry. It ultimately goes into the nucleus, and we talk about it flipping switches. But really what we're talking about in flipping switches is it's binding to the DNA, and basically it's a signal for other enzymes that come along and basically make the gene, right? The sequence of DNA that NRF2 binds to has a name, and that name is the ARE, or the antioxidant response element. So it was named because antioxidants were activating this NRF2 pathway and those downstream genes. So antioxidants, one, can activate NRF2, but two, what we want to talk about is really a holistic antioxidant protection. SOD, for example, if we come back there, it's not floating around everywhere in the cell. So it really becomes a localization type of a thing. So if we talk about vitamin C is very water soluble, so it can diffuse around to different parts of the cell that's water soluble. But then we have other antioxidants like coenzyme Q10 or vitamin E that are lipid soluble. So they're going to be working specifically in like the cell membranes of the cell. So really, we want as much antioxidant protection as possible, but it's not an either or thing. So I want to drive that point home. Just because you're taking some vitamin C now doesn't mean that Protandim NRF2 Synergizer is working. I have some interesting kind of research studies in the back of my head where I want to test that. My gut feeling and what I think the scientific literature is leading us to is there should be some really strong synergistic effects with some of these vitamins, minerals, and daily wellness, and the Protandim line especially.
Wonderful. Okay. Well, I appreciate all the time you've given us tonight. This was just so helpful. You're so knowledgeable, but you made it so kind of dumbed it down a little bit and made it kind of for the layperson to understand. But for those of us that geek out on all of this science, it really is fun to listen to it, and appreciate your presentation and just the wealth of knowledge you gave to us tonight. So we just appreciate you so much, and thank you for giving us your time. We're going to wrap the call, and thanks everyone for joining.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for
so
taking time out
much.
of your evenings tonight.
You bet.
Yes.
Take care. Thanks
It
everyone.
was awesome. Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
All right. Thank you, Marilyn.
Thank you. Thank you. Stop the recording.